Hey everybody, it's the Wannabe Doctor. Man Fred here. He's gonna help us out. He's obviously dead, but he's cool. I dig him. Anyway, alright, this is Dr. Hannah's AP2 class, and stay tuned for more.
Is my desk like ever in your thing?
No.
I like taking up this whole desk.
I mean, there's been a couple of times where I've caught just the side of you.
You mean aside from me going like?
Yeah, except for that one.
I saw one of your videos and I was just see how I act. That's bad. Like, let me see. Okay, you won't be able to see this. Okay.
Usually I have it just about there. Man, you subscribe to the channel. You don't watch them?
I did, but I don't watch it. I should have, but I don't.
Intro to the last video is pretty funny. And I'm getting a little creative.
I have a colored pen. It has like 4 colors. Wait, wait.
You're alright. I'm not doing nothing yet.
And remember, in the ovary, we didn't have an ovogonium. And the ovogonium is the diploid cell. This is the stem cell presentation of egg. This ovogonium is going to pass through a mitotic division, mitosis. It's going to be forming a primary oocyte. Primary oocyte will pass through meiotic division, meiosis. This is going to be 2 successive cell divisions. I have meiosis 1, which will allow me to produce secondary oocyte. And the second division in meiosis, this is what we call meiosis 2. And this was responsible for the formation of the functional gamete. This is line 4. If you remember,
Question.
this is line 4. Yes.
I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying, and is that meiosis or meiosis?
Meiosis
One.
1. So,
It looks like meiosis from back here.
meiosis, so some people will say meiosis, some people will say meiosis.
Oh, okay.
So some people would not pronounce the E, some people would pronounce it.
Okay.
Alright? But meiosis is not with a T.
Okay, mitosis.
Mitosis. Alright, so you say meiotic division or mitotic division. Alright? So meiosis, this is the way when you pronounce the E, and without the E, you say mitosis. So when this is going to be taking place, mitosis is going to be taking place only during fetal life. It's going to stop taking place after birth. What's kept in the ovary is going to be the primary oocyte. Primary oocyte will be kept in the ovary in the form of follicles. And remember, the type of follicles that I will keep in the ovary during childhood and infancy, this is going to be primordial follicle. And remember, the primordial follicle is going to be formed of a primary oocyte surrounded by squamous cells, like what you see on here. This is one primary oocyte, and this is going to be my primordial follicle. Alright? You will not be able to complete meiosis 1 unless this primary oocyte got exposed to LH surge. LH surge, this what will enhance the primary oocyte to become secondary oocyte, and also going to be triggering ovulation. So you will not get a secondary oocyte unless you get an ovulation here. So each month after puberty, you're going to be getting a primordial follicle to become a mature follicle that will rupture and release the egg. This egg will be able to complete meiosis 1. Now you've got a secondary oocyte. Is a secondary oocyte is a functional gamete? It's not a functional gamete. In order for me to complete the second phase of meiosis, it needs to get penetrated by sperm. If the secondary oocyte, this ovulated egg, got penetrated by sperm, completes the second phase of meiosis, it's going to be forming the mature ovum. And the mature ovum now is going to be integrating its genetic material with the genetic material of the sperm. This will result in the formation of the first cells of the baby. What triggers this primary oocyte, the primordial follicle, to become a mature ovarian follicle to allow ovulation to take place is your hypothalamus. Every month after puberty, what's going to happen? The hypothalamus detects low ovarian hormones. If I have low ovarian hormones, hypothalamus will be releasing GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. GnRH is going to be stimulating the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH and LH. But mainly we're focusing here on FSH. What FSH stands for? Follicle stimulating hormone. So what is my function? Is to stimulate the follicle. What follicle do you have in the ovary? Primordial. So now, few primordial follicles will start the activation process. Only one of them will become a mature follicle every month. So during the maturation, what's going to happen to the egg inside the follicle? What do you think is going to happen to the primary oocyte when I'm growing my follicle? Is there anything that's going to happen to the primary oocyte? Hello?
Yes.
It's going to stay the same until ovulation, right? So what's the difference between the different follicles? Is going to be the granulosa cells, the follicular cells around the egg. So the primordial follicle, under the effect of the FSH, it's gonna turn into a primary follicle. And the primary follicle, I have primary oocytes surrounded by cuboidal and or columnar cells. This is my primary follicle. Primary follicle, still under the effect of FSH, is going to become a secondary follicle. And remember, secondary follicle, I have more than one layer of follicular cells. This is my secondary follicle. Secondary follicle still under the effect of FSH. It's going to become a Graafian follicle or a mature follicle. How would I know that this is the mature follicle? You will see that the cells diffuse together or form a space filled by fluid, because this is my antrum. Remember, what do we call the Graafian follicle? What we call the mature follicle again is my Graafian follicle. What's going to be released from this growing follicle? What hormone will I be releasing? I am releasing
LH.
my estrogen. This is the first ovarian hormone. Who's going to be producing large amounts of estrogen is going to be the mature follicle. Much more estrogen will be released on. Lots of estrogen is going to be released on. This large amount of estrogen produced by the mature follicle will have a positive feedback on the hypothalamus and my anterior pituitary gland. This positive feedback will be resulting in the release of large amounts of LH in response. This sudden rise of LH is what we call the LH surge. LH surge will trigger 3 events to take place. First thing that's going to happen, the maturation of the primary oocyte into a secondary oocyte. What's going to happen to this oocyte? It's going to be released from the follicle. The follicle will rupture, and this release of the follicle, this release of the egg is what we're going to call by
Secondary
ovulation. So ovulation will take place, and what's going to happen to the follicular cells that were surrounding my egg in here? Those would be transformed into a yellow body. This is what we call the corpus luteum. Remember, corpus luteum is going to be releasing a different ovarian hormone that precedes gestation. We call it progesterone. And the progesterone, something that we need to remember, is going to be
positive feedback.
inhibiting the anterior pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. It has a negative feedback. So the estrogen has positive, progesterone has negative feedback. So during the presence of the corpus luteum reducing the progesterone here, I am reducing FSH, and as a result, what's going to happen to the estrogen levels? drugs. Why? Because simply you're not producing estrogen from any growing cells, any growing follicles. You don't have growing follicles if you don't have FSH. If fertilization didn't take place, no sperm, what's going to happen to this corpus luteum? It's going to be degraded after 14 days. So the corpus luteum is going to remain in the ovary producing progesterone for 14 days. After you degrade the corpus luteum, you're going to have a drop in the progesterone level, and because of the negative feedback of the progesterone, what's going to happen to all ovarian hormones when you degrade it? All the ovarian hormones are going to drop. So we're going to have a drop in both the estrogen and the progesterone. Who will detect this drop in the ovarian hormones is your hypothalamus. How will I respond? GnRH reads. GnRH will stimulate anterior pituitary gland to release,
FSH.
which will stimulate primordial follicle to become primary, to become
Secondary.
to become mature follicles that will be releasing large amounts of which will have a positive feedback on line and the anterior pituitary gland that will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release large amounts of all of this is which will result in ovulation, completion of meiosis 1, and corpus luteum formation. What ovarian hormone will be released from the corpus luteum is going to be progesterone. Progesterone will be kept released from the corpus luteum if no fertilization takes place for 14 days. What if the fertilization did take place? It's gonna, the corpus luteum will remain releasing progesterone for 3 months. For 3 months. You don't want to have shedding of the endometrium as we can see yesterday. Remember? The first phase of the menstruation. The first phase of the menstrual cycle. This was from day 1 to day 5. And this is where I have shedding of the stratum functionalis of the endometrial lining. Remember, endometrial lining needs ovarian hormonal support. You see on here, if I have drop in my ovarian hormones, I have nothing to support my endometrial lining, and as a result, you're going to have shedding of the endometrium. This will result in the menstrual blood flow. Starting to release FSH, stimulating follicles to grow, you're going to be releasing estrogen. Estrogen will enhance the proliferation of the glands, of the vessels, and we call this phase my proliferative phase. This is where you're going to be proliferating, increasing the thickness of the endometrial line. You're building up vessels, you're building up glands. And you're going to be adding receptors on those glands for the progesterone. After day 14 of the menstrual cycle, so this goes from day 6 to day 14, this is when I have the LH surge. After the LH surge, ovulation takes place and the corpus luteum is going to be formed, releasing progesterone. Progesterone, before gestation, before pregnancy, what you are going to be doing here on the endometrial lining, you're going to be increasing the glandular secretion. You're going to be engorging the spiral arteries and fill them with blood. You are willing to create a suitable environment for the zygote to be implanted, for the embryo to be implanted. Because this growing cell is rapidly proliferating, it's gonna need large amounts of nutrients, large amounts of secretions to get whatever it needs to proliferate. So try to imagine that one cell will keep proliferating in a very short period of time to become a human being. I have a very fast rate of proliferation. I have a very high metabolic demands. This is going to be provided by the endometrial lining. You're going to need to fill the glands with secretions. You're going to need to fill the blood vessels, spiral arteries with blood to create this suitable medium for implantation. If no fertilization takes place, what's going to happen? Degrade your corpus luteum after 14 days. No ovarian hormonal support will be present. So what's going to happen to the endometrial lining? Shed. And who's going to detect this? Hypothalamus to release GnRH to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH, to stimulate another primordial follicle to grow to become mature follicles that will have a positive feedback, release estrogen, and the cycle will keep going. So what I will end up in here, having a drop in the ovarian hormones, is what triggers the beginning of a new cycle. And this is what makes it a cycle. So the end of the cycle is what triggers the beginning of a new cycle.
When the estrogen levels drop, that's why
Progesterone levels drop due to the breakdown of the corpus luteum. But because the progesterone was inhibiting the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary gland, so your estrogen levels are already low. See? So I have progesterone, and the presence of the progesterone lowers down the estrogen level. Alright? So as a result, you're gonna have drop in the progesterone level, and you did have already low estrogen levels. So you're gonna have low progesterone and estrogen levels. Both of them are gonna be low. Alright? Here, the corpus luteum is releasing multiple hormones other than the progesterone. But for our level, we are mentioning mainly progesterone. And this is the main hormones that we're going to be producing. Once you break it down, you're going to have a major decline in all the ovarian hormones, which you are required to maintain the endometrial line. Alright, but maybe here we're focusing on the progesterone. Alright? If fertilization takes place, you're going to keep the corpus luteum until it gets replaced by the placenta. Placenta is going to be producing a similar hormone to the progesterone called the human chorionic gonadotropin. Alright? Questions? So I did post for you a recording of this for you to review, because this is going to be our essay question on the coming exam. Alright, so if you want to review it from the recording, I posted it for you on the course content already. Alright, moving on to menopause. Why females will have menopause? Simply because I have a limited number of follicles. I cannot perform any more mitosis of the ovarium after birth. So what's going to happen when you deplete, when you consume all the primary oocytes that I have in the ovary? Will I be able to grow any more follicles on here? No. I'm not able to grow any follicles. Will I be able to produce estrogen? No. And as a result, I have a decline in my estrogen levels. What's going to happen as a result of this declining estrogen? You're going to have atrophy of the reproductive organs. This includes the breast as well. Why? Because you're not getting them stimulated. Estrogen stimulates those organs to proliferate. If I have a decline in the estrogen level, I will have atrophy of the reproductive organs and breasts. Some will experience irritability, depression, hot flashes of the skin due to vasodilation of the blood vessels. Some even experience hot flashes when we give them anti-estrogen medications. So if a person got a breast cancer, so we're going to be removing the breast cancer, we're going to be removing the lump, we're going to be removing the main lymph nodes that got affected by the cancer, and we're going to be giving her also anti-estrogen medications. And some will report that they got hot flashes of the skin once they take those anti-estrogen medications. Alright, so lowering down the estrogen level will cause hot flashes of the skin. Also, estrogen is what keeps your bone and skin healthy. It's a proliferative hormone. It enhances the proliferation of those cells, like in your skin, like in your bones. It's one of the stimulants to the osteoblasts to build up bone. So you're going to have it right after menopause, person will develop thinning of the skin and gradual degradation and bone loss. That's why the first and major risk factor for developing osteoporosis is menopause. You're rarely going to see a male with osteoporosis. Yes, there will be males with osteoporosis, but it's much more uncommon compared to females. Estrogen also is a protective hormone against atherosclerosis. Normally, the estrogen lowers down the bad type of fats. This is the cholesterol or low density lipoproteins, and will be increasing the good type of fat, which is going to be the high density lipoproteins. This is the normal action of the estrogen. You see on here, what happens when I have a decline in the estrogen levels? I will start to increase the bad guy, high density, the low density lipoprotein, and I will have a decline in the levels of the good guy, the high density lipoproteins. This puts me at the risk of developing atherosclerosis. And this will tell you why it's much more common to see males with myocardial infarctions compared to females. Why? Because they are at a much higher risk of developing atherosclerosis. They will be at a higher risk of narrowing down the coronary vessels of the heart, putting them at the risk of developing a myocardial infarction. Why? Because females have been protected throughout the fertility periods by the estrogen, which we don't have this protection as males. So you see on here, if I've got the first menses on 14 years of age, let's say, and menopause at 50 years of age. So the fertility period here is around 36 weeks, right? So I've had estrogen for 36 years, protecting me against the atherosclerosis, against the cholesterol. It lowers down my cholesterol levels. So, but for males, we don't have those 36 years of protection. Right? Yes, I will lose this protection later on after menopause, but I've had them for 36 years. That's why it's much more common to see atherosclerosis in males, much more common to see myocardial infarctions in males compared to females. Alright? Looking here at the mammary glands, which are modified sweat glands that will be responsible for the production of the milk, and those are going to be located in the breast. The breast is not only formed by those glands are going to be embedded in adipose connective fat tissue. As you see on here, the breast is going to be located in front of the muscle of the chest. This is called my pectoralis major, which covers my ribs of the chest on here. You'll see that those glands, the mammary glands, are arranged into lobules. So those are the lobules of the mammary glands, and those lobules gonna be conducting the milk to move within ducts. We're gonna call those ducts, those are my lactiferous ducts. Lactiferous ducts are the ducts that will be conducting the milk from the glands to be conducted to the outside. You will not directly release the milk that is going to be forming from the glands to the outside. This milk will be stored in sinuses, those bulging sites at the end of the lactiferous ducts. Those are called my lactiferous sinuses. And those lactiferous sinuses will be contracting when the baby suckles the nipple. So during the suckling of the nipple, the sinuses gonna be contracting, and this will allow the milk to be ejected to the outside. So you're not leaking milk all the time. You're gonna only squeeze this milk out when the baby suckles the nipple. All right? So you see on here, we have two hormones that will be affecting lactation. We have a hormone called prolactin, and this rises at the end of pregnancy. It comes before lactation. Pro, before, lactin, lactation. So the prolactin is rising before lactation to stimulate the mammary glands to develop and to produce the milk. Compared to the oxytocin is what's going to be stimulating those lactiferous sinuses to contract and to eject the milk, allowing the milk let down. All right? Questions? 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 All right, so breast will have between 15 to 25 lobes. The dark area around the nipples, this is what we call the area. Moving on to the homeostatic imbalances that could be related to the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system. First, we're going to start with the breast cancer. Breast cancer is usually arising from the epithelial cells of the small ducts. And you see on here, risk factors for breast cancer include early onset of menstruation and late menopause. How do you explain this, do you think? Early onset and late menopause. How is those going to be considered risk factors for developing a breast cancer? So in other words, I did have a longer or a shorter fertility period?
More estrogen.
More estrogen exposure, exactly. So you see on here, if I did have early menses, so I did have the first menses at 10 years of age, and late menopause 58. So you see here, I've added 4 years and 8 years, 12 extra years. And those 12 extra years I've added to the fertility period are years where I have exposure to the estrogen. And estrogen is enhancing the proliferation of the breast. So this means this is a risk for developing a breast cancer. Alright, so remember, after menopause, what's going to happen to the breast? at them. So being exposed to more estrogen for a longer period of time, this puts me at risk of having mistakes in the proliferation. What's a cancer? What's a cancer? It's unregulated proliferation of the cells. I have lost the control on the proliferation. Alright? The same concept, like if I told you, what is the most common reason for divorce? What? Money? What do you think? Most common reason for divorce is
I'm dead.
Adultery, that's true. It is
adultery
true.
and money.
No, it was something
More
else.
common than those two.
Wasn't
More
it
common
like-
than those two is marriage.
What?
Right?
Very good.
Yeah, okay.
If you have
I
any,
know,
if
right?
you don't have marriage, no, right? So the most common reason for divorce is marriage. Right?
get
So
married,
you see
don't
on
get
here, being a female is a risk factor in itself to get breast cancer. Alright, so being exposed for a longer period of time to estrogen, having a longer fertility period, puts me at the risk of developing a breast cancer. See on here, having fertility puts me at the risk for developing a breast cancer. Alright? So this is the same example. So how can I prevent it? You cannot prevent it. Alright? Yes.
For when it says first pregnancy late in life, what do they consider like late in life? Like what's the age?
Mid 30s, late 30s.
Why is that a factor?
Yeah, so having no pregnancies or pregnancy late in life, what's going to happen during pregnancy? You're relying mainly on what's hormone. So you're taking a break from estrogen.
And you're not getting over.
So you're taking a break for a year.
Wow.
Alright? Because even after labor, after delivery, you're gonna be releasing the prolactin, and during lactation, you're gonna be inhibiting the cycle. So the cycle is inhibited, so you don't have much estrogen. So you take a break for a year. Alright?
So that's good if you take the break, or?
Yeah, it's good. It reduces the risk. So rather than having fertility for 35 years, you take a break in between, so it's gonna be 33 years.
So like from this
I was gonna say, how the hell do you take a break?
really good thing to have children.
It's something good to have children.
Yeah, like that just means like
So more children on your house. Theoretically speaking, in terms of breast cancer, yes. But I'm not sure financially this is gonna be.
He got another point.
He's on a roll today.
He got a point there.
You talking?
If financially it would not be a problem, yes.
Right.
Alright, so another risk factor here for breast cancer is having a mother with breast cancer or a sister with breast cancer. This puts a person at a very high risk of developing breast cancer. Family history of breast cancer is another risk factor. 10% of breast cancer that you see are related to genetic markers. So we have defective genes. Those are BRCA1, breast cancer 1, and breast cancer 2. Those are the two genes that we have been marking to result in breast cancer. And even people, when they figure out the presence of those genes, they do preventive mastectomy. They remove the breast before even getting a breast cancer.
So you have to do that.
Yeah, it's like, that's what Angelina
If you know already you have a family history, if you know that one of your close relatives has a breast or had a breast cancer, so you should be checking up those genes, yes. But the bad part is that 70% of women who develop breast cancer have no known risk factor. So prevention is usually much better than treatment. So if you early detection is going to be much more beneficial. We used to recommend self-examination, but not anymore. We used to recommend self-exam, but not anymore. We usually recommend, and we still recommend mammography. So to do a scan for the breast to check if there is any abnormal masses on regular basis. Treatment will be depending on multiple factors, the type of lesion, the type of cancer cells that I have forming the breast cancer, the location, the extent, what organs am I affecting, how this cancer is extending to the nearby organs, whether it did send the metastasis to other organs or not. I have many factors according to which I will decide the plan of treatment. Alright, we usually gonna be performing surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy. Those are the three main streams of management for breast cancer.
If you, like breast cancer runs in your family, what is like the age range? I mean, you feel like a more, sorry, like get my
I'm not sure of the current guidelines for exam, but you should be checking with your primary physician. You should be aware of this. He needs to direct the person to perform those preventive measures. But I'm not exactly sure this. It's going to be widely variable, the age. But I would think it's should be from mid-20s or something. I would think so, but I'm not exactly sure of the current guidelines.
Is it true that being like hitting the breast can cause breast cancer?
No, it can cause a mass, but not a cancer. So we have a type of cellular injury. So if we got trauma, this would cause rupture of the fat cells, and a way by which you're going to be treating those ruptured or sealing the injury is by adding calcium. So this is called saponification. So you're going to be adding calcium, and this will form a mass. But it's not a cancerous mass. It's just a way of dealing with it.
My question is, what about if you have families like your parents or grandparents who died from breast cancer, but you went to test it, yours is negative? Do you have to keep testing to make sure, or once your test, you do blood test for genetic, it's like negative?
The genetic factor, if it's negative, it's not gonna be
It's always
increasing the
negative.
risk. So if you don't have the gene, you don't have the gene for life.
Yep.
So it's not gonna be, you're not gonna be acquiring this gene at any period later on in your life. You don't have it. But you still at the risk of developing a cancer for a different reasons other than this gene. As we mentioned, 70% of people who develop the cancer, so it's gonna be, so you're gonna be neglecting the fact that you are at a higher risk because of the genetic problem, but this is still representing 10%. You don't have a zero risk, you have now 90% risk rather than a zero risk, because this is only representing 10% of the patients.
So my sister was diagnosed at like 32 with stage 2 breast cancer, and I go every year for a mammogram. Why are there reports now that the mammograms aren't safe?
Yeah. aren't safe.
Yeah, that they like cause the cancer or spread it or put you at a higher risk.
So actually, this is why we stopped recommending the self-exam. And because people will start to develop mastitis, checking themselves over and over, irritating the breast tissue. Because of the irritation here, it's not recommended anymore to perform a self-exam. But mammography is much safer compared to self-examination.
Is that why they come with 3Ds?
3D is a technique of better visualization rather than being safe or not. I'm not sure how the machine works exactly and how the radiation is going to be affecting, but I don't believe it's going to be a high risk factor for causing itself the disease. All right.
It's funny you said that because I asked my doctor about, when it's good to get breast cancer, check for breast cancer, and he was like, he said in your 50s. He said because and I don't know why and I'm like 50? I said, if it's like in your family, and he was like, it's better to do it in the 50s. He said some people do it earlier, he said, but the reason why is because you're being exposed to the radiation. And he said, and a lot of times the radiation can bring on the onset of the cancer. He said, what you've been exposed to. Now that's what he explained to me. Now I don't know if I took it in wrong.
I need to read the literature concerning the risk factor of mammography causing the cancer, but we don't stick to the literature, we stick to the guidelines, the current guidelines. And I mean,
any radiation can cause cancer. That's just a fact. That's just a fact.
He said because you're being exposed to the radiation.
Just how
That's what he said.
I'm not sure of the literature and
I mean, you want to be real about it. I mean, breathing can cause cancer. All the shit in the air.
Had my sister wait till 50, she'd be dead.
I
She
know.
detected it herself, and then she went to the doctor. And once they did all the biopsies, she was diagnosed with stage 2 in her early 30s. So now I get tested every year
It's
because of
widely
family
valued,
member.
so you can have, so it's widely valued. And even not having the gene, the BRCA1 and 2, this doesn't cancel the risk for developing a cancer. I'm not exactly sure on how frequent should be the mammography and the risk of the mammography for the breast cancer development. I'm not sure of the literature concerning the issue.
I don't think it's like age is really matter on that, because I had a patient 23 years old with breast cancer.
Yeah, younger one.
It's gonna be widely valued. All right, pleasure. This would be a good topic to discuss next time. So if you can read a paper recently published, like within the last 4 years, just to read the abstract and summarize it, and you can share what you've reached with us next time. So anybody would like to do this? So you can do this, and we can share the results, what you find concerning the risk for the mammography on breast cancer.
Will you post a link to the paper?
No, you can just tell us in this class. All right, just like 1 minute talk. Both of you. Or you both raised your hand, right? So yes, both of you can tell us what you reached. All right. All right. So you see on here, this is how the malignancy will be appearing on the mammography. On here, it's occupying the bulk here of the active breast gland, of the mammary gland. Moving on to the sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, and those are going to be a set of infections. We have a bacterial infection. bacterial infections, we have viral infections that could be sexually transmitted. First, starting with the bacterial infection is going to be the gonorrhea first, and this is going to be one of the least common, but it's still aggressive STD. Spread of the gonorrhea is by getting contact with the genitalia, with the anus, and with the pharynx. And that's why people who work in a cuisine preparing foods, they need to be tested for the gonorrhea infection by taking a swab from the pharynx. Alright, so they take a swab from the pharynx to do a culture for gonorrhea because it might be transmitted from the pharynx. Alright, this is where it can colonize. Alright? It will cause urethritis in males, inflammation of the urethra, painful urination, and discharge of pus. So this is a pus that will be discharged. This is not an ejaculation from the penis. Females have problem here that 20% of the infected females will not show any signs or symptoms of the disease. So they can transmit the infection to others without knowing that they are the source of this infection. The problem here with female getting gonorrhea infection is that it might cause sterility. Why would it cause sterility? Simply because I am forming inflammation of the uterus, or I'm having sympingitis, I'm having inflammation of the fallopian tubes, and this inflammation will be healing by fibrosis. So as if I've got a tube ligation. I fill this endometrial cavity, fill the tubes with pus first, and then with fibrous tissue. This is going to be blocking the tubes, making it impossible for the sperms to reach the ovulated egg. So we call the inflammation here. This is that will be taking place in the uterus and the fallopian tubes. This is the pelvic inflammatory disease. Pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID on here. This is a risk for sterility for females. Also, some will develop abdominal discomfort, vaginal discharge, the pus on here, and people might report irregular menses. So irregular menses simply because I have inflammation and bleeding. This females, when they see blood is menses. Alright, so this is not shedding of the endometrial lining, but it will be reported as shedding of the endometrium. It will be reported as menstruation, but actually it's not, it's just bleeding. So some people will tell you, I've got menses during pregnancy. You tell her, there is no way you've got menstruation. There will be no shedding under any means of the endometrial lining, but this might be an inflammation that you've got in the vagina or the cervix, and those blood drops that you've seen, those are due to the inflammation, not because of the shedding of the endometrium, not a menstruation, but still going to be reported as irregular menses.
So like, with what you just brought up, my mom, when she was pregnant with my brother, she was like far enough in pregnancy that she, until she started getting morning sickness, she had no idea she was pregnant because she was still, there was no showing, she had no symptoms other than the morning sickness, and she was still having her regular menstrual cycle.
And I've read the literature concerning this topic, and it has been reported that most of the cases that did report having bleeding during pregnancy, this is due to some kind of external bleeding, not shedding of the endometrium, because you cannot
have shedding of the endometrium and still keep the baby implant inside. This might be another reason you don't have those cycling, but you might, because people will not actually pay, that might be falsely reported because they didn't pay much attention to what exactly happened during this period.
Okay, because when I was pregnant with my last one, and I was pregnant when I did not know. I was having my period regularly. But my doctor did all type of tests to see if I was bleeding inside. They could not figure it out why. Until
But after you know that you're pregnant, did
no,
you
I
just bleed
find
after?
yeah, it's top of it. I find out. Even my doctor could not figure it out. It was like my 3 months.
I'm not sure. What I did. It might be false interpretation. Did you make sure that you did check on regular basis every month on certain days?
Yeah. And I go to doctors almost every 2 weeks. I do all type of tests to make sure.
I mean during those 3 months.
Yeah, the whole 3 months. I had to figure it out myself because my taste bud changed. Then I decided to go buy a pregnancy test and test my own self.
And there was no bleeding anywhere.
No. And that was the only answer. Once I found out, I took it, the answers to her, then that's when they'll be like, huh, how do we miss that?
I won't know more than your gynecologist. To be honest. He is specialized in this area. Alright, but what I know and what I did read is usually it's due to some kind of inflammation taking place, to an infection maybe, but it's gonna be reported as irregular menses. Alright? So this is what we irregular menses. Alright, so whenever we say as a sign or symptom an irregular menses, we mean by this it's a bleeding. Alright? Alright, so moving on to the syphilis. Syphilis is a bacterial infection that would be transmitted sexually and congenitally.
No, it says that the fetus is still.
The problem with congenital syphilis is that it will cause stillbirth, or the baby will die shortly after birth. So the mother can transmit the infection to the baby. Infection is going to be asymptomatic. It doesn't present with any symptoms for 2 to 3 weeks. Then it might cause a painless chancre. Chancre is a painless ulcer, like what you see on here, which will be disappearing within few weeks. So if it's not painful, most probably the patient will not be seeking treatment. And the problem is that it will turn into secondary syphilis if untreated. And the secondary syphilis also gonna be unremarkable. It's gonna be presented by unremarkable symptoms, so like skin rash, like fever, like joint pain, as if you've got a skin infection or something. So it's not specific. So again, if we didn't seek any treatment and it didn't figure out the infection, that it's a syphilitic infection, it might progress to tertiary syphilis, where I have major destruction and disfigurement here of everything. So you're going to be breaking down the bones, skin, nervous tissue, CNS is going to be affected, blood vessels, everything going to be affected by the syphilis infection. treatment is so easy if detected early. Alright, penicillin is an effective antibiotic against syphilis. Moving on to the chlamydia. Chlamydia is the most common bacterial STD, and it's representing almost 50% of the total number of PIDs that we might see. Again, what's a PID? It's pelvic inflammatory disease. This is where I will be accumulating pus, healing the pus with fibrous tissue, and this is a risk factor or a very high common risk factor for sterility in females. Alright, so this will be presented by urethritis, benign and vaginal discharges, abdominal rectal pain, as well as testicular pain and painful intercourse. Females, it's going to be irregular menses. And remember, irregular menses, this is due to the inflammation taking place. Alright? This can also affect the joints, causing inflammation of the joints, arthritis. Can cause urinary tract infections in men, and sterility in women. And why sterility again? Because this is a high risk factor for developing a pelvic inflammatory disease. Treatment, we're going to be using tetracycline here, antibiotic to kill the chlamydia. Moving on to another STD. It's a viral sexually transmitted disease, viral infection. This is by genital warts, and this is due to human papillomavirus or HPV. The problem with HPV is that it's a risk for developing a cancer. Cervical cancer here might be due to human papillomaviral infection, and that's why it's mandatory now, I believe in all states, or most of them, to take vaccination for HPV. Right, because the vaccination against HPV will reduce the risk of developing cervical carcinoma. Genital herpes, this is another viral infection. This is due to human herpes virus type 2, and this is going to be characterized by latent periods and flare-ups. So you can have latent periods, the virus is going to be dormant, and whenever you have a lower immune response, so for example you got stressed or you got sick from another problem, you have flu for example or something, so this will cause the flare-up of the virus. So the virus will start to replicate whenever you have a drop in your immune response. Congenital herpes is related to malformations of the fetus. That's why if a pregnant female figures out that she has herpes virus, her doctor might recommend her to end her pregnancy. Alright, because of the major malformations that will result in this baby. Alright, treatment of this viral infection is going to be to take antiretroviral medications. This includes acyclovir and other antiviral drugs. Acyclovir is one of the most commonly known antiviral drugs.
One, so I heard that everybody has herpes type 1 too.
Yeah. But this will not cause genital.
Everybody
Those
has.
are two effects.
Oh,
This is relatively
So according, when do you start the treatment? When do you start the treatment? So all of them are curable if you start early. But if you end up having sterility because of the infection, this will not be curable at this point. Same for the cancer, according to the extent of the cancer, this will result from the infection. Might be curable or not is according to the extent of the disease. But in early stages, we're going to be using those antiviral medications and antibiotics to treat those different infections. All right? Questions? All right, so we can have a break for time. We come back and discuss metabolism.
That's what triggers the cold sores.
That's scary because I had a person that said he gets cold sores.
I used to get cold sores because I went to public school every single time. It's not due to stress or my system's not healthy. It just triggers it. Like at the public pools. When I swim in public, it triggers it, and I get a cold sore.
I buy the 4-pack.
So I stopped going. Permanently.
Oh, you're gonna crash hard, you know. Careful out there. Yeah. Go away. Anyway, no.
Crazy.
No.
I didn't know it was like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't get so I said for a long time.
Yeah, that's it. Write down the number.
All 5 of us.
Oh, 100 probably. I didn't get the result, but it's 100. I can guarantee you. I stayed it till 4 a.m. And it's for sometimes I'm not. I'm tired and sleepy. Maybe because of that coffee.
Are you going to try boss?
Yeah, I'm an iron artist, but that's on there. Oh, I heard of that. If you look through the people, I got mine in high school potential.
I'm taking mine over.
It was like Jared Casino. I got to like Jared Casino. So then, they gave me the certificate and everything. Okay, counting stuff. Y'all go. I'm sorry. I was telling Trey that.
You just have that saucy look on his face.
What?
Okay, I'm cooking.
About what?
I didn't think I see
I'll go
what's
cook.
I'll cook it you. Tell me.
Oh, what is that? Can I have a bite?
Trader, you did not tell her.
This is the.
Okay, never mind. Y'all talking about two different things.
Yeah, we talking about two different things.
No, I'm not. I was telling Sarah, because you were there. You might as well finish.
Yes, ma'am.
I took it with you. We did a lot of work in Tesco because he kind of acts just stuff like that.
I'm into it. Right? Her birthday is 2 days ago. Her birthday is 2 days ago.
I'm a cancer, my boyfriend's a Sagittarius, but I had to wait for us to get along.
She gonna pay? You should took a call, bro. He was real good. He was like, we have no text. We just had different presentations.
It's
And the 10 page essay.
I've never emailed me this, and I'm like kind of catching us up, so I don't
She
know.
have her own book.
She got her own book? Oh, yeah. She was going crazy.
Yeah.
But if he's anything like he's waiting. Like waiting. He's waiting for something to happen, like her.
The wall of the top, which would be feeding.
That was cool. That was really weird. I'm like, oh.
I'm like really enjoying this chair right now.
Those are gonna have skins, then they will
I have a
be
chemistry test next
not
week.
stimulated much more behavior because they don't have simple shapes. So that is
Don't cram.
chocolate that has simple
Don't cram the study. That's
I have
not
a wedding
I
on
would give
Saturday,
you
so I'm trying to get everything done.
I would give you hungry.
If I have to take a special more, but I have technology, it's gonna take a lot to
Like
take tests.
something that will not be inhibited. The fight is gonna be chocolate.
You have a nice
It's gonna
car.
be using chocolate.
You have a nice car.
I second that.
Grabs flat. Grabs flat.
I'm so happy.
So we're gonna feel hungry, more hungry than we
I went into work yesterday and I saw one of my coworkers I hadn't seen in a while. And everything, she's like, "You're looking good." Like she's like, "I can see it." And I was like,
more I eat, the more the energy will be stored, and in the fat cells, the fat cells will respond by depending by reducing this hunger sensation for you to stop eating. Now this is gonna be
Everybody's
Okay.
it will be sent to the brain, this will be leptin. So some people will be taking leptin just to reduce the hunger
Do
sensation.
you ever high metabolism?
Leptin is the type of signal that's going to be sent from the fat cells to the hunger cells to stop eating. So it's going to be varied from one person to the other. How is those going to be varied to get to? We might have something like rapid energy consumption. So we might have, for example, movement, rapid movement of the stomach. So the stomach is going to be bringing the food down to the stomach. This will be absorbed in a much shorter rather than spending 2 hours to move the food from the stomach. That's
I don't actually do that, but in my head I'm like, okay. I just pay attention. I don't like eating anything that's like above 400 calories. I don't like it. Like above 400 calories. It just depends on like what it is. Like most of my little like ready meals that I have at home, like my soups are like 2 something. My little dinners that I have like yesterday before I
Do
was
you
born, it was
feel,
pasta with like
did you
shrimp
feel
and broccoli.
did you check
It was so good.
any
It was
body
like
weight
about
change?
300 calories. It was so good.
Gain, loss?
I don't know what's on there.
At this point, you're gonna need to check your blood sugar level if you have blood habits.
Yeah.
And you need to check how frequent you go to the restroom. If you're going too frequent, you're drinking too much
I like to, I tried doing that for a while, like I would only drink the alcohol. Just feel how it affected me. I don't wanna get both. I'm glad that I tried to go away too, because that means I can't drink a lot of sodas. And so does what was the big thing at Starbucks? But I did that. When I first started, like, you're gonna have first, and like, I was, you're gonna like, you know, at first, I was like, shit.
I'll eat my celebration.
Right, you can do that too.
Celebration.
Go ahead, Nick. Go off.
What's her name? Marici? It's Adrian outside. Yeah, she's pretty cool. Yeah. She makes it simple. And why are you taking my house? Why are you taking my house? I realized after I took it, I didn't need to take it. Yeah, you gotta take chemistry. She don't teach me. That's them, they know how to buy.
That's a normal receipt.
That's the one I want to buy. I got that here.
Because, you know, I gotta get this together for a fall. It's like I try not to take tests for so I could decide short term all the classes. I need that for not 7 weeks.
It's too fast.
Yeah. So I gotta at least get for class ready for next.
I need to get mine redone, but I don't have to.
So if you want chemistry and microbiology, is it
Wasn't that yours?
I'm not sure.
You already drank it.
You gotta take chemistry. I know, let it. You see, then you take. So then you take chemistry and microbiology. Chemistry and microbiology.
Can you take them both together?
My advisor,
I think you gotta take chemistry. You have to take chemistry first.
but I gotta go more on it, I need to get into this program, so they don't recommend you doing, and I did it, I really planned it, but it's like, you have to get permission.
Yeah, you can write on the Go to
I
your
gotta take
advisor.
my medicine. Do you like your professor? Do you like the only thing that's
Enjoy the club, the 4 hour club. Yeah, 4 hours.
4 hours? I could barely sit still.
We got no choice. I got no choice.
I'm like basically
4 hours?
but I can't find anything. What time?
No lecture, and he was there. And that online course, which is the,
What time?
9 to 12.
Microbiology. It's 2 lectures.
I'm taking chemistry right now.
I still gotta take chemistry.
You should take Rebecca Haley at
Well, there's I thought you were dying because the only thing you do is
and she's a really good teacher.
but she only does that. Well, I had to sign up Friday before she.
Really, the class really doesn't matter that
Mine's
much.
like 10:28 or something.
Oh, 10:30.
10:32.
My bad. That's fine. I mean, she doesn't do
But it's the
chemistry.
one, you're going to be nurses. So
I don't think any of the classes matter.
That's general chemistry. So basically,
So you're gonna
basically, But her class only has like nurses in it, dental hygienists in it, so, like she's taking, oh, he is taking it. So her and I had the same class together. I saw you looking at your,
What is going on with you?
We're just discussing what bus we're riding for grad bash. Like, I just got seen a big old group chat with like almost like a bunch of high school kids. And they're funny.
Got the world in her, Alright, what are we doing? I mean, Some days it's my birthday. So it'll be another old man.
What about,
Another year old man.
yeah, but you Chris.
I don't even focus on it. I don't even focus on it. Is he having a baby?
I know, right? I know. Hi.
Yes, chapter 24.
Alrighty.
Is it on the exam?
I believe so. I'm pretty sure I saw it in the Q banks.
I'm not gonna make it.
It's in this self-detention.
So, moving on to the metabolism. Metabolism is simply all the chemical reactions that will be taking place in your cells. Everything that is going on inside, all the chemical reactions, all together, this is called metabolism. And metabolism, generally speaking, is going to be either you're building up more complex structures from simple ones. Like, for example, I'm using the amino acids I'm eating to build up my muscles, to build up the myosin filaments, the actin filaments within my muscle cells. Or I'm storing the glucose I'm eating that I did just absorb last time, if you remember. The absorbed glucose in my cells to be stored in the liver cells, for example, as glycogen, or in my muscle cells as glycogen, or in my fat cells as triglycerides, and so on. So I am building up complex structures from simple ones. This is called the anabolism. Anabolic means you're building up. Anabolism. Catabolism means you are breaking down. You're breaking down. Catabolic reaction means you are breaking down. Or hydrolysis. Hydro means water, lysis means to break. So again, metabolic reactions are going to be into two major forms, either anabolic reactions or catabolic reactions. So you did eat proteins, you did digest those proteins into amino acids that were absorbed to be conducted to your blood. You did eat carbs that were absorbed in the form of monosaccharides, if you remember. You did eat fats, and those fats were absorbed in the form of glycerol and fatty acids. You might consume them and keep breaking them down to produce energy. So you're gonna keep breaking them down by catabolic reactions, and you're gonna end up producing the energy that you need and carbon dioxide and water. This is a catabolism. I'm going from more complex structures to simple ones: water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. Or I would be using those amino acids to build up proteins, enzymes in my cells, to build up carriers, channels in my cells. So you are transforming simple molecules to more complex molecules, amino acids to proteins, for example. This is a
anabolic reaction. You're using this sugar to be stored, this glucose to be stored in your muscle cells as glycogen. So you're building up a complex chemical structure from simple one. So this is an anabolic reaction. Same concept on here. If I get fat from outside and I don't want to break it down to produce energy, I have enough energy. I don't need any more energy to be produced. You're gonna be storing this fat in your adipose tissue cells in the form of triglycerides. So you're gonna be adding the glycerol to 3 fatty acids. Triglycerides is gonna be formed and stored in your adipose tissue cells. This is the formation of a more complex structure from simple ones. This is an anabolic reaction. So this is just a quick overview of the general reactions that we're going to be discussing in this chapter. So again, you're either going to be building up or breaking down according to what? According to your needs. If I need to produce energy, I will be breaking down those nutrients. If I don't want to produce energy, I will either store them or build up my cells. Moving on to the most important chemical reactions that takes place in the body. This is going to be the breakdown of glucose. And glucose is a monosaccharide. It has 6 carbons. So the chemical structure of here of the glucose is C6H12O6. In the presence of oxygen, this glucose can be broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So again, what we can see on here, you are breaking down glucose in the presence of oxygen, producing carbon dioxide, water, and energy, ATP. I'm going to be producing 32 to 36 ATP. How are we going to be allowing this reaction to take place? This is what we're going to be discussing in the next 40 minutes. Alright, so here we're looking at the cell membrane of the cell. This would be my outer membrane of the mitochondria, and this is going to be my inner membrane of the mitochondria. So again, we are inside the cell. I did allow the glucose to travel to the inside of the cell, so now you've got the glucose inside in your cytoplasm. This is where the first step of this reaction gonna be taking place, and this is my glycolysis. Glyco, sugar, lysis, breakdown. You're gonna be breaking down the glucose in the bread without oxygen here into 2 pyruvate, 2 pyruvic acids. If you don't have enough oxygen in your cell, what you're going to be doing, you're going to be transforming this pyruvate into a more stable chemical compound. This is called the lactate or the lactic acid. This first step will result in the production of 2 ATP. And remember, when we discussed this in the skeletal muscles, we mentioned that the lactate accumulation within the muscle cells in an anaerobic glycolysis, if you don't have oxygen, this what will cause the muscle fatigue. Why? Because you did transform the pyruvate, the pyruvic acid, into lactate. So how many ATPs did I get so far? 2. How many would I be getting from this reaction? 32 ATPs. So what you're gonna be doing, if I do have oxygen, so let's say I have oxygen. So here we don't have oxygen, here we have oxygen. What you're gonna do? You're gonna be conducting here this pyruvic acid to the inside of the organelle responsible for the production of energy. Can you remind me what is the organelle responsible for the production of energy? Mitochondria. Alright? So again, this is my mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria is formed of 2 membranes. I have an outer membrane and inner membrane. We can go to the inside of the inner membrane. We carry the pyruvate to the inside. And you see on here, this pyruvate, in order to pass through a set of chemical reactions, it's gonna be transformed into acetyl CoA. So again, where did I get this acetyl CoA from? From my pyruvic acid. The acetyl CoA will pass through a cascade of chemical reactions. This cascade of chemical reactions is what we're going to call the Krebs cycle, and this is going to be the second phase for this reaction to take place. This will be my Krebs cycle. If I told you that this is my acetyl CoA that I've got from the pyruvate, and I will add to it oxaloacetic acid, both together are going to be producing what we call citric acid. So again, where did I get the citric acid from?
From the acetyl
I did add acetyl CoA to my oxaloacetic acid. This will be the first chemical reaction. See on here? You started with the acetyl CoA coming from the pyruvate. Acetyl CoA gonna bind to oxaloacetic acid, and as a result from this reaction, you're gonna end up forming citric acid. Citrate. So another name for the Krebs cycle is the citrate cycle. So if you're reading through your textbook, you're gonna see citrate cycles. This is the same as Krebs cycle. All right. So citrate that's gonna be formed is partly acetyl CoA and partly oxaloacetic acid. If I told you that you're going to be passing this citrate in a cascade of chemical reactions and you're going to end up having oxaloacetic acid at the end of those reactions, what did you lose?
The
Acetylcholine. CoA, not choline. Coenzyme A. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. This is acetyl CoA. All right. So again, the first reaction that takes place, acetyl CoA binds to oxaloacetic acid. It will form citrate. Citrate will pass through chemical reactions. Citrate will become an isocitrate, ketoglutaric acid, succinide CoA, and then succinate, fumatic acid, then malic acid, and then it's going to become oxaloacetic acid. Through those reactions, what I will be losing? I will be losing hydrogen,
I will be losing carbon from the structure of the acetyl-CoA. So how many carbons do you have in the pyruvate, do you think? How many carbons did I have in my glucose?
6.
6 carbons. If I split the glucose into 2 parts, so how many carbons would I have in the pyruvate?
3.
Pyruvic acid. 3 carbons in each one of the pyruvate. And in order for me to transform the pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, I will be losing one of those carbons in the form of carbon dioxide. Here. So how many carbons do I have in the acetyl-CoA?
2.
2 carbons. And how many acetyl-CoAs do I have? From one glucose, how many acetyl-CoA will I have?
I was gonna say 2.
Hello? 2?
2.
2, 4, 10, 8,
1.
1. How many acetyl-CoA would you get from each glucose that you've got? 1. 1. 2. 3. 9.
Answer please.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, wait, wait.
This is a good choice, alright? Alright, so again. What is the chemical structure of glucose? This is C6H12O6. I have how many carbons? I have 6 carbons. I told you that the first step is glycolysis. You're going to be splitting the glucose into 2 parts. So each part will have how many carbons? 3. So those 2 parts of the glucose are called my pyruvic acid. So the pyruvate or pyruvic acid, each one of them has 3 carbons. I told you that the pyruvic acid is going to be transformed into acetyl-CoA.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So
And as it's gonna be transformed into acetyl-CoA, it loses one of the carbons in the form of carbon dioxide. All right. So how many acetyl-CoA will I get?
2.
2. Because how many pyruvate you did have?
3.
You did have how many pyruvate?
2.
You have 2 pyruvate, each one gonna be transformed into an acetyl-CoA, so you're gonna end up having 2 acetyl-CoA. Alright, easy?
Yes.
No. So you start with glucose. I would have 2 pyruvate. Each one is gonna be transformed into an acetyl-CoA, so how many acetyl-CoA will I get? 2. So how many Krebs cycles will I have
2.
for each glucose?
2.
2 Krebs cycles. So again, what we're gonna do? The acetyl-CoA binds to oxaloacetate. This is the only reaction I want you to remember. When you add the oxaloacetate to the acetyl-CoA, this will result in the formation of citrate or citric acid. The same. I will pass through a cascade of chemical reactions. I will become oxaloacetic acid another time. Oxaloacetate. The citrate. Yeah, citrate will become oxaloacetate another time. Alright? Questions? So how many carbons are you expecting to lose in each Krebs cycle?
2.
1. Wait, and each no, 2. I don't know.
2.
Per 1 glucose? I mean, per 1 pyruvate or per 2 pyruvate?
Per cycle.
Per each cycle. So per each acetyl-CoA, how many carbons would I lose?
1.
The 2 of each one of the acetyl-CoA, because each acetyl-CoA has how many carbons?
2.
2. So for each cycle, how many carbon dioxide will you be releasing
2.
to lose those 2 carbons? 2 carbon dioxide. So you see on here, where are the 2 carbon dioxide that you're going to be losing? Do you lose any other carbon dioxide?
No.
No.
So what is the source of this carbon that you did release? It's gonna be from your acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA had 2 carbons, and those gonna be lost through the Krebs cycle. What else do you still have in your structure? What else do you still have in your structure? So you've lost all the carbons that you've got. You've lost 1 carbon over here, 2 carbons in the Krebs cycle.
Still got hydrogen left.
I still have hydrogen.
Right. And oxygen. Right.
I still have hydrogen, right? So where do I lose the hydrogen? You see, 1, hydrogen has a high energy bond. It needs a carrier to be transporting this hydrogen. So I will be losing 2 hydrogens where? During the glycolysis. So the first 2 hydrogens are going to be lost in here. They are carried on NAD. This is my carrier.
Oh, okay.
So I am carrying here the hydrogen attached to a carrier. The hydrogen cannot be lost freely. So it cannot travel free by itself. It needs to be carried by a carrier. So the carrier here to carry this hydrogen is going to be NAD. How many hydrogens did I lose so far? 2. 2 hydrogens. How many are still remaining to be lost? 10. So if I'm telling you that we did split this glucose into 2 pyruvate, that will become 2 acetyl-CoA. So each acetyl-CoA should have how many hydrogens? Do you think? If you still have 10. So show each one should have 5. Let's count up. During the transformation of the pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, you're going to lose 1. Through this Krebs cycle, you're going to be losing 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you've lost how many hydrogens from each pyruvate? You've lost 5. So you've got here 2 hydrogens lost during the glycolysis. Krebs cycle, you're going to be losing here 5 hydrogens from each pyruvate. You see on here, 4 of them are going to be carried on NAD. And 1 of them is going to be carried on a different carrier. This is going to be FAD. Alright? So again. How many carbons did I have in the glucose? 6 carbon. How many hydrogens? 12. Yes.
Yeah, okay. FAD, it says 2 hydrogens on the
Don't worry, so it carries only 1. Don't worry about this. I don't want to get the details. You see here, hydrogen plus hydrogen.
Okay.
So it is part of the structure of the carrier itself.
Okay.
Alright? But I carry how many hydrogen? Just 1. So again, I've lost carbon dioxide during the transformation of the pyruvate into acetyl-CoA. I've lost 2 carbon dioxide through the Krebs cycle. So how many Krebs cycles do I have? I have 2 Krebs cycles. So how many carbon dioxide I will be generating here? 4 carbon dioxide. Why 4 carbon dioxide? Can you remind me? 2 acetyl-CoA will be losing each 2 carbons. So you're going to be generating 4 carbon dioxide from the Krebs cycle. When you get the pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, you're going to be generating 2 carbon dioxide because you've got 2 pyruvate that are transformed into 2 acetyl-CoA. Alright, does this make sense? Questions? Also, as I am breaking down the glucose, I will be generating some energy. I will be building up some high energy bonds that will be formed between an ADP and an inorganic phosphate. So from each Krebs cycle, you're going to be generating 1 ATP. So how many ATPs will I generate from each glucose so far? How many net ATPs that will be generated so far? We've got how many from the glycolysis? 2. How many from the Krebs cycle? 2. Why? Because 1 from each Krebs cycle. And how many Krebs cycles do you have? 2. So you're going to get 2 ATPs from the Krebs cycle, 2 ATPs from glycolysis. So what is the net number of ATPs that you did generate? 4. How many do I want to generate? 32. Alright, so here I am producing 2 ATPs. Where is the remaining part of my energy? So we don't have glucose anymore. You did break down everything. This takes us to the 3rd step of breaking down the glucose. This is called the electron transport chain, or what we call the oxidative phosphorylation. What do I have now to the inside of the inner membrane of the mitochondria? I have carriers, and attached to those carriers, you're going to have hydrogen. The bond between the carrier and the hydrogen is a high energy bond. This is a highly active hydrogen. I have on the inside of my inner membrane of the mitochondria carriers that will be breaking down this bond between the carrier and the hydrogen, and will allow the hydrogen, or the proton now, to be transported to the space between the 2 membranes of the mitochondria. This is my intermembrane space. This will be taking place for both the FADH and the NADH. I will split the attachment between the carrier and the hydrogen, allowing the hydrogen to travel in to the intermembrane space. So what's going to happen to the pressure of those protons in this space? Do I have a high or a low potential pressure? Very high potential pressure. You keep splitting and throwing the hydrogen in this space, throwing the hydrogen in this space, throwing the hydrogen in this space. So what's going to happen if you have a carrier that will allow them to travel back to the inside? Would they like to travel inside to a lower pressure, or they would remain at a high pressure in between the 2 membranes? They would like to go to a lower pressure. But this is a highly active chemical structure. I need to lower down its potential energy. And if you remember, can you generate energy from nothing? No. Can you create it? No. You can just transform it from one form to another. So the energy here cannot be lost. This potential energy of the hydrogen cannot be lost, but it's going to be transformed. I will be getting this energy and transform it into a stored energy in the form of a chemical bond between the ADP and an inorganic phosphate. You're going to be forming the attachment here between the ADP and the inorganic phosphate. How did I build up this energy bond? By consuming the energy from the hydrogen. This high potential energy protons will be allowing the formation of a high energy bond between ADP and inorganic phosphate, resulting in the formation of ATP. So what will I do with this hydrogen? Now it has a much lower potential energy. It's much more stable. Would you leave the hydrogen like this? No, it cannot remain like this. What you're going to do, that's why you're going to need this oxygen. That's why you're breathing. Why you're breathing? To provide your mitochondria with this oxygen. This is where you're going to be adding what you're going to be adding to this hydrogen, and this will result in the formation of water. This is what we've called the metabolic water, if you remember, of the water intake. They have three forms of water intake. They have beverages, food, and metabolic waters. This is the waters that we were talking about. The waters that will result from the addition of the oxygen to the hydrogen of the glucose. So again, what are the three steps of this chemical reaction? You started first by glycolysis. You're splitting the glucose into two parts. What are the two parts that you're going to be forming? Those are pyruvate. This reaction will result in the formation of how many ATPs? 2 ATPs. And how many hydrogens will be lost in this reaction? 2 hydrogens will be lost in this reaction. Carried on NAD. This pyruvate will get into the inside of the inner membrane of the mitochondria as acetyl-CoA, which is going to bind to oxaloacetate to start a cascade of chemical reactions. What do we call this cascade of chemical reactions? This is my citric acid cycle or my Krebs cycle. You're going to be adding the oxaloacetate to the acetyl-CoA, and this will result in the formation of citric acid. Passing through the cascade of chemical reactions, you're going to be losing all the different parts of the acetyl-CoA in the form of hydrogen carried on NAD or FAD, and you're going to be losing the carbon dioxide, the carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. So how many NADH would you be releasing from the Krebs cycle? 4 from each Krebs cycle. And how many FADH would you be releasing from each Krebs cycle? 1. So the total of NADH that will be produced from the Krebs cycle is going to be 8. And how many FAD? 2. What's going to happen to this NADH, FADH? What's going to happen? It's going to be, they will be broken down by carriers present on the inner membrane. And what you're going to do with this high energy protons, you're going to be conducting them to the intermembrane space. A carrier will allow them back in. This is called my ATP synthase. And why did I call it ATP synthase? Why do you think?
It's a thing.
All right. producing ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. What you're gonna do with this low energy protons that you did carry to the inside of your mitochondria, now they are chemically stable and you can add glucose to them. This allows you to drink water. Alright, so if we are producing 2.5 ATPs from each NADH and 1.5 ATP from each FADH. So what is the number of NADH that I get? So you've got 8 from the Krebs cycle and you've got 2 here from glycolysis. So you've got a total number of how many NADH? 10 NADH, right?
Yes.
And how many FADH will you be producing throughout the process? 2 FADH, right? And how many net ATPs did I produce? I've got 2 from the glycolysis and I've got 2 from Krebs cycle. So you've got 4 ATPs. If I told you that each NADH will be generating 2.5 ATPs, passing through the electron transport chain, and the FADH will be generating 1.5 ATPs passing through the electron transport chain. So this will result in the formation of 3 ATPs and 25. So what is the net number of ATPs that I would be getting? So you've got 25 plus 3, 28 plus 4 is 32 ATP on average. Why do I mention on average? Because not all this potential energy of the hydrogen traveling to the inside of the mitochondria is going to be producing ATP. Some of it going to be lost in the form of heat. So it's going to be slightly variable. Most of this energy is going to be stored in the form of chemical bond between the ADP and the inorganic phosphate producing ATP. But some of this energy is going to be lost in the form of heat. Easy? Questions? 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 So looking on here, I am passing through multiple carriers, a chain of reactions on here. We don't need to know the details of the electron transport chain. It has a lot of details. It has a lot of details. Alright? We have coenzymes that will be sharing the conduction of those hydrogen atoms. We have a lot of details that we will not be covering. Alright? But what will I end up with? I will end up having lots of hydrogen, lots of protons in between the inner and the outer membrane of the mitochondria. This has a high potential energy. This hydrogen is chemically unstable. It needs to lower its potential energy. Can I lose this
energy?
No.
I can just transform it from one shape to the other. So this potential energy in the hydrogen will be used to produce ATP, to build up a bond between the ADP and the inorganic molecule. What do we call the carriers that will be transforming this energy into a bond between ADP and inorganic phosphate to produce the ATP? This is my ATP sensate. ATP sensate is going to be responsible for the formation of the ATP from this potential energy stored in my protons. Now, the protons are more chemically stable. They are able to bind to my oxygen. So while you're breathing, you get oxygen, right? And why do you need oxygen? To survive. And why do you need oxygen to survive?
It's just the way it is.
Use energy, and how the oxygen is required to produce energy, because if you didn't bind this hydrogen to the oxygen, you will not be able to move more hydrogen down the concentration gradient. You cannot move any more hydrogen if you didn't bind them to oxygen here. So why you are not able to maintain life without oxygen? Simply because this will stop taking place. You're not able to produce any more energy. All right? So while you're eating, to get this C6H12O6. While you're breathing, to get oxygen. And both are required to produce what?
ATP.
How many ATP will be produced per glucose? Around 32, from 32 to 36. Why it's range? Because some of this energy carried on those protons is going to be lost as heat. Not all of it is going to be converted into ATP. Makes sense? Questions? Questions? All right, so moving on to the energy reserves. When cellular ATP reserves are high, I will not gonna be in need to bring down this glucose. If I have lots of ATP in my cell, those reactions will stop taking place. You're gonna be stopping the glycolysis, you're gonna stop the conversion of pyruvate, you're gonna stop the Krebs cycle. All those reactions will stop simply because you have a lot of ATP. And what you're gonna do with this excess glucose that you are gonna have is gonna be stored. It's gonna be stored either in the form of glycogen in the liver and the muscle cells, or gonna be stored in your adipose tissue cells in the form of triglycerides, in the form of fat. What if I don't have enough energy? What will I do? I will reverse this reaction. So rather than building up glycogen, glycogenesis, building up fat, lipogenesis, you're going to be breaking them down to produce the glucose that you want. You're going to be performing lipolysis and glycogenolysis. So here I have excess energy, so you're going to be storing the glucose in the form of glycogen. And when you build up glycogen, this is my glycogenesis. Glycogen genesis is to produce, to create. If I'm producing fat, lipogenesis. So again, this extra glucose that I'm gonna have, that I will have, is gonna be converted into either glycogen or
your body has more tendency to store the excess energy in the form of fat than to store it in the form of glycogen. That's why if you have excess energy intake, you will not be growing your muscles. You will be growing more of your adipose tissue. Alright, although you're going to be restoring this excess energy in the form of glycogen in your muscles else, but your muscles will not be growing much compared to your adipose tissue. Adipose tissue, your body has more tendency to build up fat than glycogen. And it's much easier to break down the glycogen to get the energy rather than the fat. Alright? So when you build up, you're going to be building up more fat, and when you break down, you're going to be breaking down more glycogen. Alright? When blood glucose levels are low, what will I be doing? I will be breaking down the glycogen into glucose, or I will be breaking down the proteins and fats and transform them into glucose. What are those two reactions? If I am breaking down the glycogen, this is called glycogen lysis, glycogenolysis. Lysis means to break down of the glycogen, glycogenolysis. If I am building up a glucose from a non-carbohydrate source, from fat or a protein, this is what we call gluconeogenesis. Genesis is to create, to form, to produce. Neo is new, and glucose is the glucose, sugar. So here I am forming new glucose. So what I mean by new means I am an original sugar. I didn't have any carbohydrate source. I am coming from either fat or protein. So again, in case of high energy level, you're going to be storing the glucose in the form of glycogen and in the form of fat. If you have low cellular energy, you're going to be building up glucose either from a non-carbohydrate source by gluconeogenesis, or you're going to be breaking down the glycogen. This is called glycogenolysis. All right?
Yes.
Still here?
Yep.
Yes. Kind of.
I'm starting to get it. My brain.
Two more slides. Two more slides. It's enough for it. So that's it for today. We're done. Sure.
Go home.
Alright, so please write down your names on your way out. I will be posting the slides this weekend with the highlighted ones. You can find again the recorded videos on Blackboard. Those are covering the organs, if you want to review the digestive system, it's also recorded and posted on your bank.
Thank you. My tired kicked in and I'm sitting there going.
Good, great. I feel it.